Nora.
Welcome, comadres and friends. I'm Dr. Nora de Hoyos Comstock, national and international founder of Las Comadres para las Americas. The leadership team and I are pleased to have you join us for tonight's teleconference as we're celebrating our Sweet 16. And it has been our privilege to support Latino authors throughout these 16 years. And we look forward to many more. We hope you'll be a part of that. We'd also like to extend a warm welcome to readers following us on our live Twitter chat at Read Latino Lit. Tonight, please help us welcome authors Dr. Irene Blea and Jennifer Maritza McCauley. Their interviews will begin shortly. But before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. Keep yourselves on mute because we are taping. You can keep your videos on, but remember excessive movement is distracting if people are viewing using the gallery mode. We suggest you put yourself on speaker mode to avoid these distractions. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat and we will try to get to them. But first, let's start with our book club's history. And Comadre Maria is in for Comadre Tess, who's out tonight. Comadre Maria.
You're on mute.
Good evening. I am Maria Ferrer, Director of Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club. Our first book club gathering was in July 2004 in New York. After a hiatus, Nora Compton re-envisioned the book club and relaunched it nationwide to promote the work of Latino authors to every book lover and to bring our community to bookstores and to support our writers. We started these teleconferences in October 2006. We are in our 16th year of sharing works by Latino authors with all of you. We created the teleconference and the book club to entice everyone to read more Latino authors, to learn more about our Latino roots and the different perspectives on Latino culture and heritage. Our book club and teleconferences are open to all, not just Latinos, men and women. We are creating a space for everyone to explore the Latino writer's mind and soul as portrayed through the written word. We encourage you to join our local book club in your city or in your time zone. We have 12 clubs to date. There is sure to be one that fits into your schedule. Let us know and we can help you. And if your city doesn't have one, why not help us start one? We will help you. We're here to help you. For more information about our book club, please visit our website, www.latinolit.com. So please join us, invite others to join us. Comadre Karen.
Welcome, comadres and friends, to our June 2023 Zoom teleconference. I'm Karen Gonzalez, Assistant Coordinator for the Las Comadres and Friends Book Club, Denver Comadres Book Club Facilitator, and co-founder of the Colorado Alliance of Latino Mentors and Authors. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight, we begin our interview of Dr. Irene Blea. Dr. Blea is a native of New Mexico. She has written and published 13 books and over 30 popular and academic articles. She is currently compiling poetry for a chapbook and working with Mark Cusio to read them to music. Irene with Wolf Medicine is her autobiography, memoir, and latest release. Interviewing Dr. Blea is Sheila Perez Kindo. Madre Sheila is a Chicana of indigenous Mexican and Chinese ancestry living in Colorado. She is a former pediatric animal assisted and recreational therapist and worked for 33 years in a large safety net hospital. Sheila is a member of the Mile High Veterans and the Auraria Historical Advocacy Council, both of which provide educational scholarships to community youth. Sheila is also an aspiring writer. Comadre Sheila, take it away.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Irene, for being here. It's such an honor to be with you and to have this opportunity, Irene. So would you take this time, Irene, to give us kind of an overview of your book, EREN with Wolf Medicine? You're muted, honey. Irene. Irene, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. Thank you, Sheila, and Karen for being so supportive of my work. I truly appreciate you and have grown to love you in a very short year, by the way. Irene with Wolf Medicine was not something that I intended to write. I intended to write how to survive domestic violence and kind of redefine yourself after that experience. But my friend Vivian said to me that that was not my story, that my story was having gone on and gotten a Ph.D. and traveled around the world and written books and taught classes, etc. So I thought about it for a long time and finally decided that, yes, that there were a lot of domestic violence stories and they are important, but maybe I should make the book a little longer. Anyway, the title of the book is Irene with Wolf Medicine. And I know that in some cultures you don't spell Irene with an E, but my great grand uncle called me Irene, not, Irene, not Irene. And so I spelled it the way he would say it. I was born in the mountains in northern New Mexico, and the year that I was born, the Mexican gray wolf went into highly endangered, on the highly endangered species list, and then became nearly extinct. And I was away from New Mexico for many years, and when I returned was the exact same year that a wolf reentry program released the Mexican gray wolf back in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, where I was born. So I always knew that my family felt that I was born with wolf medicine because the wolf was heard howling for the last time on the night that I was born. So I thought that I would write my story. I always write two stories in one book. The story of the Mexican gray wolf and its near extinction, and my own near extinction, because as you read it, you'll see that at some points I was highly destructive and suicidal. And that I also had to re-enter New Mexico. Because at the same time that I became educated, we moved from New Mexico to Colorado. And at the same time that I started school Spanish speaking in Colorado, my life changed phenomenally, and I became less indigenous, less the mountain woman and the farm woman that I was, and I realized that I was losing a lot. So the more educated I became, the more Americanized I became, the further I got away from even considering or knowing about the wolves, and the more I got away from the indigenous nature of my family and the way we grew up, my extended family. So that basically are some of the main topics that I touch on the book, but that's the chronological progression of the book.
There are so many different themes in the book, including, of course, you mentioned domestic violence, not the sexual assault, but mental illness, familial and love relationships, culture and empowerment. Will you tell us what you think are the most important topics? I know you mentioned a few there, but there are so many things that need to be discussed in the book. And I think it's important that people know what you feel should be taken or should come away with.
Well, from my perspective, one of the issues is decolonization, how we become colonized, and how we strive to decolonize and reclaim our authentic selves. And I began the book with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and the impact of that international treaty, which was, by the way, almost immediately violated. The impact on indigenous people and on Spanish-speaking people in New Mexico. So I think decolonization is one theme. I struggled to decolonize my own mind because I happened to be like 22 years old, I think, and I was in the Chicano movement. So we had to learn our own history, and then we had to write our own history, then we had to publish our own history, then we had to teach our own history. So part of my decolonization process was being involved in the movement and engaging in decolonization that way. And then, of course, I encountered a lot of sexism during the movement, and that sexism I decided to confront. And there was some backlash from the women because the women were not accustomed to speaking about, and this was like in the early 70s, but they knew what had happened to them. So once they had language, I was able to also teach one of the first Chicana classes at the university. So education is another theme, in that sometimes it cuts both ends, and it's very empowering and we need it, but I think we also need to balance it out. And sometimes the institution was just not formulated to do that. So decolonization, education, feminism, the analysis of race and the intersection of race, class, and culture. I had to write textbooks in order to teach my students. And so another theme that I haven't addressed in these interviews, Sheila, has been writing and the need for us to write our own stories. So those are a few. Did I miss anything?
Well, those are a lot. That's such an awesome opportunity that you have to express all of these ideas and themes. I appreciate that you recognize the ancianos and honor the indigenous mestizaje in your book. I don't think many people know about the experience of the Genízaros and what transpired with the detribalized. Who are they, Irene?
In New Mexico, into southern Colorado, and probably in other places in the Southwest, but it's not very well documented at this particular point in time. The Genízaro generally is they're detribalized people with indigenous backgrounds. Now, one of the scenarios is that there was, people call it slavery, and it was a form of indentured servitude, but there was a trade there was human trafficking, basically, was what was taking place. And a lot of times Spanish-speaking families would purchase or acquire indigenous people. They generally were looking for young girls about the age of 12 and boys about the age of 9. So these people were trafficked and sold amongst the different tribes. We have 19 indigenous pueblos in New Mexico, so it was highly practiced here. And Genízaros also have become detribalized. Like, for example, I don't know to what degree that kind of human trafficking took place in my amongst my ancianos, because that was never written down, and I haven't seen too much evidence in the genealogy records, although I don't do genealogy as well as some of the people before you on the screen. But my great grandfather didn't want to sign. He didn't want to be on the Indian rolls because he didn't trust Americans. And so we became detribalized at that point. And then he married my Spanish-speaking grandmother. And I'm sorry, by the time my grandfather married my Spanish-speaking grandmother, that family was totally detribalized and had entered Spanish-speaking culture to a great degree. So that basically, it's a fascinating field, and there's a lot of work being done here in New Mexico, especially.
Your book provides an honest and a bit shocking account of how sexual assault occurred in your life. Looking back do you think that mental illness that you experienced was partially a result of that trauma?
It did color my life. It colored my life for many years. I think I'm 77 now, and I was 40 years old when I finally decided I needed to talk that out and enter therapy. But it colored my life in that I was always the other, and we get othered very frequently without having any personal stuff happening to us. But I just felt that I was, I don't know if I use the term used goods, but I never felt confident in relationship to boys. And then there was the whole experience of just being a girl in elementary school, where the boys would reach out and grab us between the legs or grab our bottoms. And then there's an episode in the book of where I was nearly raped. And so all that sexual dysfunction made me dysfunctional to a great degree. And in that great degree, I engaged in some self-destructive behavior. And that self-destructive behavior is outlined in the book. But, you know, when you know better, you do better. So having gone to counseling did an awful lot of good for me with regard to some of those that sexual abuse. But there was a point at where some of the therapy just didn't work. And maybe we can talk about that if that's within the realm of your questions.
Up to you. I want you to be able to express what you need to and what you'd like to.
Well, I was in a counseling session, and I never felt a part of a lot, sometimes even family structure. And there came a, and I think my identity was so convoluted, and I was so far from the origin of my identity in a working class town in Southern Colorado, and primarily a Spanish speaking community, because in those days, the teachers would tell us not to speak Spanish at home because we would not fare as well in school or in society. But I think that, coupled with the racism and then the sexism after getting divorced, I got married young, got divorced, and was raising a child alone. The intersection of those three variables, okay, this is not a gang sign, where are we? The intersection of those three variables makes for a very convoluted identity that is fragmented. And in that fragmentation, we think that there's something fundamentally wrong with us. And there probably is something fundamentally wrong with us, and that is that we have not coalesced, we have not come back to the authentic self. I love the Cicados murals, because on some of the murals, he'll take off the mask. You'll see the image and he's holding the mask. And nos quitamos la máscara throughout the Chicano movement. And then when we encountered sexism and we had to battle that, we took off another side of that. And it was a desarrollo of a sort. And we haven't talked about this very much, in that in becoming complete and totally spiritual persons that are working towards a decolonized mind, there's a certain undoing of the old personality and the rebuilding of the new identity, the new personality. And that's something that's again complex and convoluted and requires professionals. And right now there are a few professionals who understand it and know how to deal with it. But we need to get that in the literature. So if you have those kinds of stories, do not let the concept of vergüenza, which runs rampant through our culture, keep you silenced and keep you from writing those stories, because those stories are important. They are healing stories. Everything that is in this book, I had to live through, not only writing it the first time, but throughout every editorial phase of it. And then you get your book and you're very happy and you're reading your book and you go through it again. But it makes it easier to talk about. It makes it easier to share with other people. Makes it easier for all of us to heal. And one of the reasons I wrote the book was not only because of the message that I received from the wolf, but I wrote it so that I see people dying around me, not healthy, and there are three elements of health: physical, spiritual, and social historical healing. And we can take care of our bodies, but if we still don't feel a part of things, if we're still alienated from our own culture and our own background, our own history, then we're not totally and wholly healed people. And I just saw too many women die, not knowing what had happened to them. And I don't want to see that anymore.
I can agree with that. And I think that getting rid of the vergüenza, or the shame, feeling shameful, or all of that has a lot to do with the old Catholicism type things that went on. But I feel like it's so empowering for you to be able to get rid of that and to be able to express yourself this way.
Well, you know, Sheila, I was the first person in my family, well, the second person in my family to be divorced. A male cousin of mine about the same time got divorced. And it was a source of shame. It was just that simple act that we kind of take for granted sometimes today, was a very shameful. In fact, I thought I had been kicked out of my Catholic church. And then, of course, as you know, eventually I gave up on Catholicism also. But that's another story, perhaps.
Right. It was interesting as well to see your educational path and the way that you witnessed many struggles that altered your world outlook and obviously changed your ideology over time. You had a very prestigious position at Metro State College in Denver on the Auraria campus. Shortly after, about 350 families were displaced by gentrification. You worked with students whose families experienced what you described as soul trauma. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, when I first arrived on, that was my first teaching assignment, not first teaching assignment, but my tenure track position. That kind of set my career. But I arrived at this beautiful Auraria campus in downtown Denver, and it was real modern. And Denver was very proud of it. But as I chaired the Department of Chicano Studies, students would say to me, you know, my grandparent lived on this street, because there's a park on the campus, and it preserved one part of one street. And they would tell me, oh, you know, my mother and my father grew up in, and they would give me the address, and I would know them at the time. And now so many years have gone by, I've released them. But little by little, I became very interested in where did the people go when they built this community. And what happened was that eminent domain was imposed upon these people, and they were not informed of what was going to happen until a very late date. Long story short, they were displaced. And as the students continued to speak about it, I decided that maybe I needed to develop a research class where I taught some research skills and then sent the students out to document their family experiences on Auraria campus. Well, in the process of doing that, we did a videotape, and we produced a videotape. And one of the things that were promised and documented in that videotape was that there would be scholarships for the displaced Aurarians and their children. But those scholarships were never awarded. So by the time I was ready to leave Metropolitan State College, I gave everything to the library, and some of that evidence disappeared. And I'm glad to tell you that it has been resurrected. And it's one of the proudest things I think that I am of having accomplished while I was there, that this project helped revitalize 35 years later, 40 years later, the fact that these scholarships were not awarded, and now they are going, I think some have been awarded also, but they are going to be awarded at higher degree, and the Irerians are now a political force on campus.
That's correct. In fact, my family was one of the families displaced.
That's right.
I appreciate you
write
talking
that
about
story, you know that.
Yes, yes. Irene, it's important for the audience to know that you are the administrator of a Facebook page titled Chicana that has more than 5,600 members. I wanted to say that the word Chicana was chosen by Mexican Americans who were socially active and politically involved, who knowingly rejected other given titles such as Hispanic or Latino. Can you tell us about that motivation?
Well, I was part of that whole movement, and I designed La Chicana. I designed several Chicano Studies classes, and each one of them contained an element of a focus on feminism. And when it came to that Facebook page, I had already retired and was feeling somewhat out of the loop, and I missed the students and I missed teaching. And then COVID hit. But prior to that, I think I told you the story about having 13 members on my Chicana Facebook page, and I was so happy, just happy, so happy. I called my friend Eddie Montour, who's a Brown Beret, and he said, well, you go for it, just do it. I think there's a need out there. So to have 5,600 plus women on that page is not only a source of pride for me because I'm an egotistical person, but also because those women are now connected and they dialogue with one another about a variety of things. I try not to impose my own philosophy on it, but I chose the word Chicana on purpose because that's how I identify. And that was my history. And I get to keep current on current events regarding Spanish surname women and other women. And I also get to learn because if you join that page, you can submit an article or a meme, a picture, a historical record. And if it's germane to women, generally I do share it and I police it. I police it quite vehemently because there are always crazy men and crazy women who want to get on that page, but I do the best I can and I actually will research them. But I just enjoy that page so much, and thank you for mentioning that. It's serving a community need. Otherwise, I don't think it would have grown to the amount of people that it did grow to.
Irene, I know that time's running out, and I have so many more questions for you, and I know I'm not going to be able to have them answered here, but just one last thing. Reflecting on the book, would you add or omit anything that you shared?
It was very difficult to write at times. I did omit the names of some people, changed the names of some of my relatives. One cousin didn't want me to write about her, and I wasn't going to. I was going to write about her mother, and then she didn't want me to write about her mother. And so I just changed people's names to protect the innocent. And even after I've confronted my molesters, I still have mixed feelings because they now have children and grandchildren, and they didn't do anything. I don't want them to carry the stigma of that, but people who needed to know. And so I did leave that out. I left out a few stories, and I think I'll do a collection of short stories on that. But now that I'm writing poetry, I can see that I have the outline for my next book, and they are a collection of some of those short stories.
Excellent. Excellent. Irene, thank you so much. We look forward to having you in Denver for a book signing, hopefully in the near future. And
Oh, I
just
hope
appreciate
so.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Blessings. Blessings to you. And Karen, thank you for being you and being the loving person that you are.
Well, gracias, Irene and Sheila, Comadres. Okay, our second interview is with author Jennifer Maritza McCauley. She is a writer, poet, and university professor. She has been awarded several fellowships, including one from the National Endowment of the Arts and CantoMundo. Jennifer is an assistant professor of literature and creative writing at the University of Houston, Clear Lake. Interviewing Jennifer is Comadre Shirley Yanes, a Guatemalan Nuyorican. She is a content creator and a co-host of Geekettes Chat, along with her sister Christy. It is a book and movie review channel on YouTube. Shirley enjoys reading books, manga, watching movies, anime, and singing her heart out at karaoke. Take it away, Comadre Shirley.
Thank you, Karen. That was a great description of me, a lot. And thank you, Jennifer, for being here and letting me interview you. And I just wanted to show your book.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I love that you love anime. I'm a huge anime nerd, so
Wait, get out, really?
yeah, I'm obsessed with anime and manga. I read manga every night before I go to bed. I watch anime.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Because when I put that description, I was like, is that weird?
Oh, no, that's awesome. Rurouni Kenshin is my favorite, but I
Okay,
can be
cool.
this way to others. Sailor Moon was like my gateway drug, but then I got into all the others.
Oh, that was my sister's gateway drug. My sister Chrissy, that was, and that's how she got me, like with Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, and all that stuff.
Yeah,
like,
that's how I got it. Sailor Moon was what got me into it, but then there were
yeah. Sorry, we're going off tangent, but
I read shoujo manga specifically. I don't know why I love it so
oh,
much.
really? The romance?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm actually getting into that more.
I love it. It's so simple and easy to understand, and like it brings me delight. So I love it. I read every night before I go to bed. So
Oh, that's great. I love it too. I don't know, something about it. It's just I love the worlds and the characters and the world building of it all.
Sure.
I just wanted to say thank you for writing this book, because I love just the beauty and ugliness of just I guess, the human experience of what people in the Black community and the Afro-Latino community go through. And just like, I don't know, you don't get much stories like that. It's not published as much. So thank you for that, because I thought it was beautiful. So I just loved it. So anyways, going to our questions. For those readers who haven't picked up your book, can you give us like a brief synopsis of it?
Yeah, so I love how you talked about the messiness of the characters. I wanted to write a book in which people are not necessarily good people, they're not bad people. They're making sort of questionable decisions, and they're going all over the place. And all over the place kind of physically, but also all over the place mentally. So it's about a variety of people, specifically Black Americans and Afro-Latinos, who are looking for homes specifically in idealized places or people. So that's kind of the description.
No, yeah, definitely. And you can feel it, that it's just, they're just finding a place of acceptance, even if it's to themselves or to like their communities or areas around, or society as well. Can you get into the process of writing the collection of short stories?
Yeah. So the first story I wrote in undergrad, which is kind of crazy to me because now I'm teaching undergraduates as a professor at University of Houston Clear Lake. But I started my first story in my undergraduate class. It was called Last Saints. And then I kept writing stories over my MFA, over my PhD. And then there was like midway through my PhD, they're like, you need to write a dissertation on creative writing. You need to do something critical, but you need to do something creative at the same time. And for the creative thing, I thought, I have so many short stories, I want to write a collection. So I started working on that, and then I tried to link all the characters together, which took a long time. Yeah, it took a while. So there's a lot of Easter eggs in each story. So if you read each story, except for Torsion, because one of the stories got cut, that had an Easter egg for Torsion in the next story. But all the stories except Torsion, you see the characters appear in each other's stories. But that took a while. And then when the book got picked up by a publisher, my editor said, okay, we need to work on this map even more. So there's a lot of like playing around that I did for the reader. So it's like, if you pay attention, you'll see this goes here, and this goes here, and this goes there. But that took about whatever 2009 through 2020, 21. I'm not great at math, but whatever that time period was, that's how long it that book. But I loved writing it. I had a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. And it's funny that one of my questions is about that interconnection, because I noticed reading it, I was like, wait a second, this character's from another story I just read. And now this is a different period in their life. And I was like, I was getting that. I was like, oh, wait a second, this is actually pretty cool. So I liked it. I liked it. So yeah, your collection of short stories has a variety of characters that feel real and beautiful in all of life's messiness. What is your technique in doing the research for their different like backgrounds and setting these stories in different time periods as well?
Yeah, so I think for the historical time periods, I did a lot of research. I love, especially for the stories in Louisiana, for the stories in St. Louis, I did a lot of research within those cities. I went to the museums. I went to some of the, it had sort of centers that had all the historical information together, and it was really great. My dad grew up in St. Louis for the story that takes place in St. Louis. And my father was one of the first Black boys to ever integrate a school in St. Louis. So I wrote a story about that. It's not close to what really happens. My dad will read it and he'll be like, not even close. You didn't get it close. I'm like, it's fiction, Dad. It's fiction. Fiction's about Puerto Rico. I spent a lot of time growing up there. My mom's from Puerto Rico. So I've been to Puerto Rico tons of times, but it's different writing a story set in Puerto Rico. So I do a lot of like place marker sort of research. I went to the University of Puerto Rico and did some studying there. I took a couple of classes there even while I was teaching. So I was teaching, but I was also a student at the same time. But I did that for a little bit, and that helped me for some of the stories that take place in specific locations. But the historical collection of New Orleans was really great. You can just go there and just kind of check in, and they'll let you just look at any of the archives that you want to look at all day long. You can look at things all the way from back to slavery, even before that, and they'll let you do it. So that's a really great location. So I did a lot of that for those particular short stories.
Oh, wow. No, that's amazing. And I love museums. So you can always find history.
I love museums. I'm obnoxious in museums. So my husband will take me to museums and he'll be like, I need to leave. I'm like, no, I need every single little thing. I need to know everything. And he'll be like, oh my gosh, I just want to look at the picture and just get out of here. Like, I want to know why I came here. So
yeah, man, history is so fascinating because we could just learn from it. But at the same time, we're not really learning from it because things are still the same in certain things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially with communities, marginalized communities, it's still the same in certain ways, different of course in other ways as well. But a lot of marginalized communities are still oppressed, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sadly. The Denver group from Las Comadres actually had a question. They wanted to know if these stories are real or based on real people you know.
Oh, no. No, that's great. That's a great question. I'm about to go spill some tea. Indeed. So a couple of stories are based on real people. Like I said, the story where the Black boy integrates a school in St. Louis, that's based on my father's story, but I changed everything. So if he reads it, he did read it, and he was like, nothing is what happened. I'm like, that was the point. So I'm happy that's what you thought. The story where all the boys kind of talk to a nun. there was a point in my life where I wanted to be a nun, and no longer. I'm definitely not in that point in my life any longer. Definitely far away. I have a husband. We live in a house. We're good. But there's nothing wrong with that either. So, but I had that point in my life. And my mom said, well, when I was growing up, I saw all these guys try to jockey for the affections of this one nun. And I was like, oh, I'm going to merge those two things together and create stories out of that. I was like, Mom, can I use this? And she said, yeah, you can. I always ask permission before I use someone's story, because I feel like if they took the time to tell me that story, then I should ask them for permission to use it. If they say no, I will never write about it ever again. But my parents have given me a lot of permission. So that was based on a real story. And Mavis and Estelle were actually kind of versions of myself, I think. So I thought Mavis was one half of me, the more kind of like, I'm gonna do whatever I want, I'm gonna live how I want. And then Estelle was more like my sort of ego, super ego self, who was searching, looking kind of for herself in a lot of different places or people. So I kind of merged those two people together into one person, and then I separated them. And I created characters out of that. So those are the things that were kind of based on real things. Yeah.
And I love Mavis and Estelle because like they kind of had different personalities. Because Mavis was like just like her go-getter, like just do. And I was like, damn, I wish I was like Mavis. But Estelle had this beauty of her of like just not knowing who she really is. But that's the beauty of it, of her trying to figure out what she wanted to do. I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you're making total sense. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going for. So thank you for that.
Oh, okay, great. So yes, my interpretation of these stories, for like these characters, I got the feeling that they were just trying to find a place they could call home. And I mentioned this before, especially for Black communities, Afro-Latino, Black communities in general, it's just finding that place, only their acceptance with themselves, and just accepting who they are in all the beauty and ugliness of life, but also finding a place and they could call home in a sense in society that oppresses them, which be it school or any institution that wants to oppress. So I don't know. I interpreted the book that way of just finding their place somewhere, and finding that peace. I wanted to know what your interpretation of these stories were.
Yeah, that's a wonderful interpretation. I love it. Yeah, I think it's very similar, where I feel like every character in the collection is searching. So nobody's in a fixed state where they know what's going on with their lives. Their lives are perfect. They have a family, they have a home, everything's going well for them. Every character is in a state of flux, or they're searching for something. And that's kind of what I wanted to communicate. So some of the stories start in media res, to kind of show that sort of artistically that they're in that state, that they're in the state of flux. The story will start in the middle of the action. Sometimes stories don't start in the middle of the action, but they'll get there. But then while you're there, you realize that this character doesn't feel at home. They feel kind of estranged. They feel like they're looking for something. So those were all the things I was trying to do with that. So I think that your interpretation was really nice.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Next question is Torso, which was like, I think the first story. I hope that's right.
Yeah.
Actually, my favorite. I loved all the stories.
A lot of people's favorite. It was interesting to me. I was like, oh, why did everyone respond to Torsion so much? Torsion and Good Guys got a lot of play. I'm like, okay. I don't know why, but I'll take it.
Because I don't know, it's just the love of parents or the love of a mother,
right.
And it just hit me because we love our parents, like me and my sister, we love our parents, and our mother in particular, and we would do things for her that maybe is like, because ultimately it's a story of a girl who loves her mother, and is that love destroying her, because it's making her do things like trying to like save her brother who also is getting dialysis, which also hit me too, because my father passed away and because he stopped taking dialysis recently. So that very hit me personally, to be honest. And I just wanted to ask, which is actually your favorite story in the collection?
That's a great question. I feel like every story has a little piece of me, so it's kind of hard to pick a favorite. And the thing with Torsion was that was based on a newspaper story about two women that try to steal back their son from a foster care home in Pittsburgh. And that was a prompt that someone gave me. It was like, write a newspaper story. And I found that in a Pittsburgh newspaper, and I was like, I have to absolutely write that story. But my dad is a nephrologist, so he works with dialysis. And my mother was a pediatric social worker in nephrology, so they both dealt with dialysis and all the situations. So I heard that growing up, and I'm like, okay, what if I merge these two things together? So that's how Torsion kind of came together. My favorite is Liberation Day, but the reason why it's my favorite is because I thought I was going to stop writing. That's the last story in the collection, and that's Estelle's perspective. And I realized that I've been talking about Estelle a lot through a lot of different characters, but I never let Estelle talk for herself. And I was like, okay, so I need to let her talk for herself. And there's a period where I was going through a lot of mental health problems. I just finished my Ph.D. and I didn't think I was going to write anymore. I had this collection, I had these books that I'd already published. I was like, I don't know if I could do it anymore. It's too stressful. I don't know. So I just took a couple months off, and I was really upset. And then one day, I was grading papers at UHCL, and all of my Wi-Fi went off, which is like a travesty. All the Wi-Fi went off. And then I had this sort of moment where I was sitting at a computer. I'm like, what do I do? Like, what do I do with the rest of the day? So I felt this feeling, and it was kind of like a godlike feeling. It was like, just write something, write. So then I opened up my computer, and the first thing that came up was Liberation Day, which I hadn't finished. And I'm like, okay, let me finish that story. So I worked on it. And then after that, I worked on it at that same time every week for the next 4 weeks. And I finished the story. And the moment I was finished with that story, I was like, I have a collection. I'm done. But there's nothing else to do with this. And then I sent it to my agent. My agent was like, you have a collection. We can sell this. I'm like, really? I don't know. Sure. And she sold it and it got published. And I was like, okay. So that's my favorite story, because I had thought about giving up for a little bit. But that moment got me back into writing again. So that's my favorite.
Oh, that's good. Actually, Liberation Day is my second favorite, because Estelle just not figuring out what she wants to do next was just so like, damn, that hit me, because that's kind of like I know a lot of people could experience that of like, what am I gonna do next with my life? I don't know.
I don't know if it's my favorite in terms of like, if I had to analyze all of my stories and say which is my like the one I'm drawn to the most, or which is the one aesthetically that I think I did the best at. But I think it's the story that I have the most kind of heart for, because I know what it meant to me and how it got me to finish this collection, and then it went on to do the things it did. So, you know.
Yeah, definitely. So when reading these stories, I felt like I was reading like poetry. The way you would describe the characters and like situations. Was poetry like an important method to use when writing these particular stories?
Yeah, so I consider myself a poet. My first book was poetry. Even though I call it cross-genre, my publisher will call it poetry because there's more poems than prose. So so I'll call it poetry. But there's a lot of prose in that book. But I love poetry. I grew up with poetry. I wrote poetry before I wrote prose. So I think that whenever I write prose, I'll always kind of pay attention to the line. I'll pay attention to the line. I'll try to manipulate the line. And I know there's not a lot of line breaks in fiction, but you can kind of create them. And I'll try to play with the language and try to kind of beef it up a little bit. So that's something I'm definitely interested in when I'm writing prose.
Oh, great. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know poetry like that. I'm gonna be honest, I don't read it like that.
Okay.
But but I felt like it, just the way the characters would talk about just, I don't know who they were and the situation, and I don't know, it just felt like that. And I just found that interesting. I was like, oh, okay. That was great. So yeah. Oh, sorry, what you were gonna say?
No, I just like to know who's informing each other. I can't, my poetry will not be able to separate itself from my prose. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're professor of literature. What are you teaching your students like right now? Whom are you reading with them? Did you read actually your collection to your students, by the way, like the collection?
Oh, yeah. So UHCL, University of Houston Clear Lake, they had a big celebration for me when my book came out. And I was totally embarrassed. I was like, y'all don't have to do that. That's totally fine. Like, we don't have to do this. But they did it anyway. And it was in the library, and all of my students showed up, and a lot of my friends had showed up, and it was really beautiful. With my students, I try to teach them, Janet Burway is a theorist that I look to a lot in terms of how to craft creative writing. And I think about characters in terms of want and desire. So what does your character want? What do they desire? How do we obfuscate what that character wants or desires? So in Torsion, a character wants to please her mother. You know, how do we stop her from doing that the entire story? So that's what I think about in a lot of my stories. Like, how can I have a character who wants something and then stop them from wanting that, and let their desire to get that want escalate till we get to a climax, and then clean up afterward. So those are things that I kind of talk about with my students. And I also give them character sheets, plot sheets. I learned a lot from screenwriting. I'm not a screenwriter, but a lot of my friends are screenwriters, and they give me the 3-act structure, which kind of gives you an idea of how to write a story in 3 acts, and that can be really helpful sometimes. And getting an idea of what your characters do during the day, and what I said before, what they want, and what their birthday is, and what their favorite foods are. Just little things about your characters can really enrich your characters sometimes. So I tell my students about that too. So that's why I create character sheets where you may never use any of this information, but it can be really helpful for you to get to know your character as a person, because that's kind of your idea, that you want to know your character as a real human person that you can hang out with, you can talk to, and then transfer that onto the page. So that's what I try to teach my students.
Yeah. I just love how you could just like, you wrote these different like voices, and it's just all like not like samey, I guess. Like they were just all so different, and they felt real. Like I always keep on using that word, but it just felt real. Like, they felt like real people. So I think that was just so cool. I was like, oh, okay.
I appreciate that.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. So last question, actually, what are you working on now?
So I have a poetry collection that's coming out in 2024. I'm from a Latino press, which makes me happy because I like to support us, and I'm really that we have our own presses. And it's called the press is called Flower Song, and the book is called Kinds of Grace. And it's about a period that I went through where I was dealing with mental health issues, and kind of coming into my Black womanhood and my Black Latinidad. All those things kind of come together in that collection. And I have a novel that's on submission right now. So on submission means like the publishers are looking at it, but I don't know what's going to happen yet. So we'll see what happens with that. So, potentially a novel, and definitely a poetry collection.
No, definitely. And I can't wait. And good luck with that, and in your future endeavors with your books. I can't wait to read them, truly.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you, Jennifer. And I hope you have a lovely night.
Yes, you too. It was so great talking to you. And
it was great talking to you too. And it was great talking to somebody who reads mangas too.
Yes, I love manga. I'm One Piece, Bleach, whatever it is.
Oh, wow. Oh, One Piece. Wow, that's long.
You text me, or you email me, I will be able to talk to you for hours about this thing.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great talking to you.
Great talking.
Wow, great interviews. Our thanks to authors Dr. Irene Blea and Jennifer Maritza McCauley and their publishers, Prickly Press Publishing and Catapult Press, for their generous donation of books to our early registrants. And thank you as well to our interviewers, Comadres Sheila and Shirley. The SNS. We thank our audience for taking the time to join us tonight. And for those who submitted questions, thank you so much. We'd also like to thank all our volunteers without whom this book club and all the associated work would not happen, because Maria and I can't do everything, and Tess. Please remember to support our authors by writing reviews about their books, and in places like Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, and any place you can write reviews, write them there. Those reviews carry weight with publishers as well as other readers. Buy books to support our authors. And if your library doesn't have a book you want to read, ask them to order it. And please attend your virtual book club local meetings and bring a friend or two. Remember, our book club is open to men and women, Latinos and non-Latinos. All are welcome. Our July books are The Night Travelers by Armando Lucas Correa and The Last Karankawas by Kimberly Garza. Again, thank you all for your continued support of our book club and Latino literature. Please join us in celebrating our Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club throughout the year by buying books and supporting Latino authors. Good night, all. And as always, read Latino Lit.